Obama warned some of Israel's actions in Gaza may backfire. U.S. says ceasefire in Gaza not appropriate with Hamas still holding hostages. China's Wang Yi to visit Washington amid Middle East tension. Hamas frees 2 Israeli women. France bans all pro-Palestinian protests. Gangs in Brazil torch more than 35 buses in Rio de Janeiro attacks. Bitcoin hits $35,000 for first time since 2022. U.S.-China economic talks start with first working group meeting.
Hello, I'm Wade Lee. Thank you for joining us on Funday News. It is Wednesday, October 25th, and here are your top stories. Former U.S. President Barack Obama said on Monday some of Israel's actions in its war against Hamas, like cutting off food and water for Gaza, could harden Palestinians' attitudes for generations and weaken international support for Israel. In rare comments on an active foreign policy crisis, Obama said any Israeli military strategy that ignores the human costs of the war could ultimately backfire. Obama reiterated his support for Israel's right to defend itself while cautioning about risks to civilians in such wars.
Obama said, "The Israeli government's decision to cut off food, water and electricity to a captive civilian population in Gaza threatens not only to worsen a growing humanitarian crisis, it could further harden Palestinian attitudes for generations, erode global support for Israel, play into the hands of Israel's enemies, and undermine long-term efforts to achieve peace and stability in the region." Obama and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had a testy relationship when Obama was in office.
The U.S. has said now is not a time for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, as the UN reports that some Palestinians who fled their homes in the north of Gaza have returned due to a lack of food and shelter in the south. On Monday, White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby told CNN that Israel still had work to do to go after Hamas leadership. His statement echoes comments from U.S. President Joe Biden that any discussion of a ceasefire could only take place if Hamas freed all its hostages in Gaza.
Israeli media reported that the U.S. and Qatar were trying to broker a deal in which 50 dual nationals held by Hamas would be released. On Sunday, it emerged that the U.S. had pressed Israel to delay its expected ground assault on Gaza to allow time for the release of more hostages and the delivery of more aid. In an interview with German tabloid newspaper Bild, Israel Katz, the Israeli energy minister, said everything would be done to bring the hostages home, but that would not hinder the ground offensive.
On Monday, senior Biden administration officials said that China's top diplomat, Wang Yi, will travel to the United States later this week in a long-anticipated visit that comes amid soaring tensions in the Middle East, which U.S. officials hope Beijing can help contain. Wang will visit Washington from October 26th to the 28th and meet with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and President Joe Biden's National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Officials declined to say if he will meet with Biden as well.
The trip will be the highest level in-person engagement ahead of an expected meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping in San Francisco in November. China has consistently called for restraint and a ceasefire on the Israel-Hamas war. During his whirlwind trip last week to the Middle East, Blinken held a phone call with Wang asking him to use Beijing's clout in the region to ensure the conflict does not widen. Washington has placed importance on China's ability to influence Iran.
Hamas on Monday said that it had freed 2 Israeli women who were among the more than 200 hostages. Spokesman for the armed wing of the Palestinian Hamas militant group, Abu Ubaidah, said, "We decided to release them for humanitarian and poor health grounds." The Israeli Prime Minister's office issued a statement confirming that the woman, who is named as Yuritz Cooper, 79, and Yuchev Lifshitz, 85, were handed over to the Israeli military and would be taken to a medical facility.
The statement said the 2 were kidnapped from kibbutz Nir Oz, near the Gaza border, along with their husbands, who were still held by Hamas. 2 sources familiar with the matter said the White House, Pentagon and State Department have stepped up private appeals for caution in conversations with the Israelis. The sources said a U.S. priority is to gain time for negotiations to free other hostages. Hamas freed an American woman and her daughter last Friday before releasing 2 Israelis.
Hundreds of demonstrators gathered in central Paris last Thursday in defiance of a controversial new ban on pro-Palestinian rally in the country. According to a message sent by French Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin to the country's police, citing concerns about the public order, the ban had been announced earlier in the day. The minister said pro-Palestinian demonstrations must be prohibited because they are likely to generate disturbance to the public order.
We're here to show our support for the Palestinian people.
French President Emmanuel Macron in his address to the nation on Thursday called on the French people to stay united, saying that, "It is this shield of unity that will protect us from drifting away and from all hatred." Macron flies to Israel on Tuesday pushing for a humanitarian truce, while Darmanin also called on the police to protect all locations visited by French Jews such as synagogues and schools, and said any foreigner committing acts of anti-Semitism on French soil will be immediately expelled.
Paramilitary gangsters launched an unprecedented assault on Rio's public transportation system, torching dozens of vehicles in what the politicians called terrorist acts. Criminals reportedly set fire to at least 36 buses, 4 lorries, and a train on Monday, during what local media described as one of the biggest criminal attacks in Rio's history. The attacks were reportedly a retaliation for the killing of a senior paramilitary leader called Mateus da Silva Rezende by police special forces.
Rio's right-wing governor Claudio Castro claimed at an emergency press conference on Monday evening that Rezende was known as the Lord of War. The eruption of violence brought parts of Brazil's most famous city to a standstill and forced at least 45 schools to close, affecting thousands of students. The attacks reportedly took place in at least 9 different areas where about 1 million people live. Government officials and media reports attributed the violence to the widely feared militias.
Bitcoin extended a rally fueled by expectations of fresh demands from exchange-traded funds, reaching the highest price since May last year. The largest digital asset rose as much as 11.5% to top $35,000 and was trading at $34,580 as of 10:54 a.m. in Singapore on Tuesday, taking its year-to-date rebound from 2022's digital asset rout to 109%. The possible approval in coming weeks of the first U.S. spot Bitcoin ETFs is stoking speculative ardor for the token.
A U.S. federal appeals court on Monday formalized a victory for Grayscale Investments LLC in its bid to create a spot Bitcoin ETF over objections from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. The U.S. SEC has so far resisted allowing ETFs that invest directly in Bitcoin, citing risks such as fraud and manipulation in the underlying market. The court ruling and the applications from investment titans have stoked speculation that the agency will relent.
U.S. Treasury staff and counterparts from China held the first meeting of a new working group dedicated to discussing economic topics. The U.S. Treasury Department said in a statement following the session, held by video conference on Monday evening in the U.S. and Tuesday morning in Beijing, the delegations met virtually for 2 hours and had a productive and substantive discussion on topics including domestic and global macroeconomic developments.
The two sides agreed last month to establish the two groups dedicated to holding regular, staff-level sit-downs following Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's visit to China, where she met with Vice Premier He Lifeng and other leaders. A second working group will meet Wednesday evening in Washington and Thursday morning in Beijing to discuss financial topics. Yellen has long sought more regular contacts between the Treasury and Beijing's economic leadership to gather more information about China's economy.
The answer for yesterday was C, provocative. He has made a string of outspoken and sometimes provocative speeches in recent years. Did you answer correctly? Now let's delve into the news of Obama warning some of Israel's actions in Gaza may backfire. Number 1, backfire, 产生不良的后果. The president's tactic could backfire. Number 2, harden. 更坚定,更强硬. This incident hardened her resolve to leave the company. Number 3, reiterate. 反复地说,重申. Let me reiterate that we are fully committed to this policy. Next, we have a multiple choice question for everyone to practice. Which answer would you choose? You can write your answer in the comments section. The correct answer will be announced tomorrow. And that's all for today's Funday news. Be sure to tune into Funday news from Monday to Friday and click the link below to join Funday for free. I'm Wade Lee, your host. I'll see you next time.